Yo, what's good, y'all? My name's Juan, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm gonna be talking about something a little different, but before I get into it, I just want to let y'all know I'm a very blunt type of speaker. Therefore, if I say anything that might sound offensive or harmful, please let me know because that's the last thing I want to do. Alright, so throughout my YouTube channel, I've talked about how we can grow from our struggles, but I never really took the time to actually talk about what it's like to actually go through them. Therefore, the purpose of this video will not only be to share one of my experiences, but to also serve as a reminder for you guys that things will get better. So, in my first video, I was talking about some uncomfortable truths, more specifically, my eating disorder and how I was getting through it at the time. But I never really went into depth on how I truly felt during that trial. And another reason I'm making this video is because as of lately, I've actually been experiencing some of those same feelings as I was when I first had my eating disorder. However, considering that I've already been through this before, I wanted to take the opportunity not only to embrace those feelings, but to share them as well with you guys. So let's start from the beginning. Basically, I used to have a huge fear of throwing up my entire life. All the way from when I was a kid, whenever I would throw up, I would literally panic and cry to my mom, asking her if I was gonna die and if I was ever gonna make it out of it. Whenever my stomach started to hurt, even just a little bit, I would drop everything and freeze because I would start to panic. So, yeah, my fear was pretty bad. And like I said, it lasted all the way up until my eating disorder started, which was in April of this year, 2025. I was also on a 6-year streak for not throwing up. The last time I threw up before this year was in December of 2018. So, as you can see, I took this shit very seriously. Fast forward 6 years later, when I turned 18, I finally vomited. Don't ask how I remember the date, but it was Monday, April 14th of this year. My stomach was basically hurting the entire morning, and I planned on going to the gym that day as well. So I remember taking my weight gainer that morning. A weight gainer, in short, is basically just something that you take so that you can bulk up. It has more calories, more nutrients, all that good shit. I also took my caffeine, my electrolytes, and I had something else. But long story short, my stomach didn't take any of it well. So on the way to the gym, I remember my stomach progressively getting worse, like in terms of feeling. And I remember entering the parking lot and I tried taking a bunch of deep breaths, but that didn't work. So I ended up vomiting in my backpack. It was either that or the car. And if I'm being honest, it wasn't as bad as I anticipated, considering how scared I would get back then. But I went back home and I decided to just get some rest considering that I had work later that day. And then from there, everything was going fine until suddenly a few days later, I believe on Thursday of that week, I threw up again. Same thing, my stomach started to hurt out of nowhere and then I vomited. However, this time it was much worse than before. I thought it was just a little fluke, something that I could easily move past, you know? But it turns out I was wrong. It kept happening, and I eventually went to the hospital to get some medication because I thought I had a stomach virus at that point. And after receiving like 3 different medications within the span of 2 weeks, nothing worked. And from there, that's when everything got bad because I started overthinking everything. Remember how I said I was on a 6-year streak for not throwing up? Well, during that time, my fear became dormant. It was still there, but it just never resurfaced. And after throwing up multiple times within the span of 2 to 3 weeks, my fear was reignited. However, it was much worse this time. Since I was afraid to confront it earlier on, during that 6-year streak, it slowly just amplified over time, and eventually, it came back to bite me in the ass. And from there, I started overthinking everything, and my sickness eventually became psychological. I stopped eating for about 2 to 3 days because I was afraid of throwing up after. I remember waking up one morning and my stomach was in the worst pain possible. I was shaking a lot and I couldn't even control myself. So I called one of my sisters, basically having a panic attack, and she helped calm me down a little bit. A few days later, I had a panic attack in the shower and I stopped showering for about 2 to 3 days because I was afraid of it happening again. What also exacerbated this fear and the sickness was the fact that I was actually bulking at the time, considering, I was taking my weight gainers. So my mind was constantly focused on food 24/7, which didn't help at all. I went from eating 5,000 calories a day to barely 500 in the span of 2 weeks, and that resulted in a very significant weight loss. I went all the way from 155 pounds down to 129 pounds within the span of that little time. I eventually met with my dietitian and my therapist, and it turned out that I had an eating disorder called ARFID. In short, ARFID is basically when someone refuses to eat because they're afraid of potential consequences after. For example, I was afraid of eating because I had a fear of throwing up afterwards. Some people with ARFID can also refuse to eat because they're afraid of choking after. So it's stuff like that. Anyways, the sickness kept progressively getting worse, and it got to the point where I couldn't even step outside of my house without profusely shaking. And from there, I ended up quitting the gym, my job, and I stopped going to school simultaneously. And for the next few months, all the way from late April to early July, I was mentally, physically, and spiritually fucked. Words don't do justice for how I truly felt, but there were days where I would go to sleep hoping that I wouldn't wake up the next morning, and when I woke up the next morning, I would be disappointed and I would try going back to sleep in hopes that time I wouldn't wake up. I didn't even want to leave my room because, well, the kitchen was right there, so as soon as I started looking at food, I would vomit. I thought I was done for, like straight up. Everything that gave me purpose in my life at the time was diminished right in front of me. Or at least I thought so. If there's one thing I learned from this trial, it's the fact that in order to find yourself, you need to lose yourself first. During the first few months of this trial, my ultimate goal was just to go back to my normal routine: work, school, gym, sleep, and that's it. And when I told my best friends about this, they told me something that stuck with me since. They said, as we go through trials and tribulations, we're always so fixated on going back to our normal lives. However, as much as we want that to happen, the reality is that we're currently evolving into the people that God called us to be. And in order to become that version of ourselves, we have to sacrifice the current version of ourselves. The journeys that we go through, no matter how hard it gets or how much we leave behind, is ultimately what leads us closer to our destination. And that's when everything changed for me. I didn't want to live like this, so I had no choice but to face not only my fear, but myself as a whole. And while that sucked, I kind of did it to myself because I'm not the type of person to take my time with getting over shit. I went straight into confronting my fear right away. Rather than taking the time to get over the fear of throwing up, I would force myself to throw up instead. Whenever my stomach felt shitty, rather than just dropping everything and freezing, I would punch myself in the gut so many times and I would force myself to gag and throw up. Or since I lost over 20 pounds within the span of 3 weeks, my stomach obviously wasn't able to handle the big meals that I was eating before. So I would overfeed myself on purpose so that I could throw up 5 minutes later. It sucked, but each time got easier than the last. But there was still one more test. I had to do it in public because one thing about this fear of throwing up was the fact that it triggered a sense of social anxiety whenever it emerged. So, long story short, one time my friends were over for vacation in July and we went to go get pizza at this cool pizza place. And, well, I didn't want to tell them my plan because I didn't want to ruin their appetite. But I basically downed a fuck ton of pizza, bread, and soda within the span of like 15 minutes so that I could throw up after. However, by that time, my eating habits were already getting better and I had gained a little bit of weight back, so my stomach could handle those big meals. So, I had to resort to going to the gym and hitting a crazy ass leg day after. So, my friends went to the gym, hit a leg day, but on the way there, I needed to get hyped up because I had to go full fucking sweat so I could get everything back up. So, I blasted David Goggins in my headphones on the way there until I was hyped. And once I was hyped, well, I knew I was fucked from there. And straight up, during the leg day, I took every set to failure with weight that I could barely even pick up for like 2 reps. And I fucking vomited. Basically 30 minutes into the workout, my stomach started feeling really shitty. And I remember actually smiling because I knew what was going to happen. But it actually happened a lot quicker. I ended up having to sprint across the gym into the bathroom. And I felt bad because there was a worker actually cleaning the sink that I was about to vomit all over. But I had to do what I had to do. As I was throwing up, I remember there was about 5 to 7 dudes just in the locker room doing their thing, and I expected them to all be staring at me in disgust. But as I looked up, not a single soul was looking at me, which gave me a sense of comfort. After that, I went outside, I told my friends I'll wait for them, they could take their time, and I sat on a curb and I just started rethinking my life. There was also another instance where my family and I were traveling. We flew all the way up to Salt Lake City and I get really bad elevation sickness. So as I got off the plane, as we were going to our next terminal, I started vomiting all over my blanket. And same thing, I expected everyone to be looking, but I looked up and everyone was just minding their business. And I learned two things from those public experiences. Number one, throwing up is a completely normal thing that humans do. It's basically just your stomach's defense mechanism, basically saying, hey, I don't like what the fuck is in here, so I'm gonna throw it back up to protect you. So if you ever feel ashamed for like coughing, sneezing, throwing up in public, don't feel ashamed for being human. It's completely fucking normal. And number two, no matter what the fuck happens, people will continue minding their business because straight up, not a single stranger gives a flying fuck about you. And that's a very good thing, so you don't have to worry about social anxiety whenever embarrassing shit happens. Sure, they might look for a second, but why would they stare? If they stare, um, that says a lot more about them, bro. 99% of the time, though, they won't stare. They're just gonna keep walking and doing their fucking thing. All in all, I had to become a little bit of a masochist in order to get over this fear, but now I feel much better. But that was only half of the equation. Because, like I said, not only did I have to face my fear of throwing up, but I had to face myself as a whole. More specifically, the lifestyle that I was pursuing. The lifestyle I had at the time was calm, but it wasn't meant for me. I knew I had a higher calling. But as we know, a higher calling requires a higher challenge. I didn't know what that calling was though at the time, but I wasn't gonna wait around for an answer. So from there, I knew I had to put myself out there. So straight up, I started doing a bunch of random shit that I've never done before in my life that I've always wanted to incorporate into my routines. I started doing a bunch of cardio and I realized that I'm an excellent runner. I also realized that I hate running. I started swimming and walking every day and I love that shit. I always claimed to be a believer of Jesus and God, but I never really took that seriously. Until one day, during the beginning of my trial, someone very important to me bought me a Bible and guided me closer to God and Jesus. From there, I surrendered my life to Christ during a sermon, and it was the best experience I'd ever had in my life. I found purpose in Christ, and I fell in love with the Bible and just reading in general. I'm the closest I've ever been with God, and I continue to grow closer with Him. I've also been told that I have a lot of knowledge growing up, so I wanted to start sharing that knowledge, which is why I started YouTube. And while starting YouTube, I realized that I'm pretty good at editing and I have a really good speaking voice from what people tell me. What I'm trying to say with all this is once you start putting yourself out there more, you start to realize a bunch of cool shit about yourself. Stuff that you've never realized before. If you told me a year ago that I would be striving to grow closer to God and Jesus and trying a bunch of new shit, I would have called bullshit straight up. I remember during the beginning of my eating disorder and this trial as a whole, I was depressed as fuck, and I thought I would never get out of this. But my mom continuously told me, things get better with time, and that was one of the things that actually kept me going during this. And well, here I am now. I'm stronger, happier, and I'm just in the best shape of my life, and I continue to grow while God is there with me. And guess what? It can get better for you too. For those of you that are struggling, every single situation that you've gone through in your life, your survival rate coming out of them has been 100%. The fact that you decide to get up every day, considering how shitty you feel, shows the amount of resilience that you have. Things have always gotten better, and it always will get better. But there's a catch. Things will get better, yes, as long as you're willing to do what it takes to get better. Here's the thing. You may have survived 100% of your struggles, but it didn't just happen on its own. You made a decision to continue getting up knowing how shitty you fucking felt, and you decided to keep pushing yourself through that obstacle. You did not let time continue without you. Where am I going with this? When I say things get better with time, this is what I mean. Time is constantly unfolding before our eyes, the same way that God's plan is unfolding before our eyes. I like to correlate the two. However, are you willing to work with that plan? Because ultimately, whether or not you decide to work with it, time will continue moving forward without you. Same thing with God's plan. As long as you continue to procrastinate, God's plan will just remain there, unfulfilled, just a clump of wasted potential. Your well-being comes down to how bad you want to better yourself. Are you willing to walk into that fire knowing how much pain you'll have to endure, or will you just keep God's plan waiting? You might think that it's safer to steer away, but as the fire keeps burning away, so does your future self. I don't want you to be on your deathbed saying, damn, I could have done so much with my life, and by the time you realize that, you'll already be 20 minutes away from being taken off life support. And it might sound like I'm being the bearer of bad news or like I'm a dickhead, but I'm just being honest. I love you guys way too much to lie straight to your face. You can get through this, but it comes down to whether or not you want to get through it. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, Lately, I've been experiencing some of the same feelings as I was back when I had my eating disorder. And straight up, I think it's God testing my resilience and He's guiding me to become stronger and closer with Him. But it hasn't been easy. Reliving these scenarios with you guys as I talk about them, it's made me sick to my stomach on multiple occasions. But if there's one thing I learned, it's the fact that, as uncomfortable as it may feel, reliving certain scenarios from our past is actually essential for our growth. It's essential in the sense that we outlived those terrible moments. I remember being in the worst state of my life, and I thought I wasn't going to get out of it. But by God's strength, I'm still here. And it serves as a pivotal reminder that, well, if I got through it back then, surely I can get through it now considering the amount of resilience I've gained. I also had a perspective change, which guided me closer to getting over my eating disorder. In one of my recent videos, I talked about gratitude and why we should be grateful for the small things we have. And one night, I rewatched the video, and it made me think. My eating disorder caused me to reject food, and I thought, how privileged does that sound from outside of the box? Not to diminish my own struggles, but there's people out there praying for food, and they're doing their best to get their hands on any type of food, considering how poor they are. And here I am, having an abundance of food, and still deciding to say no. It made me grateful for how much shit I have, and it guided me to start appreciating my blessings even more. And from there, I haven't had nearly the amount of problems as I had during the time of my eating disorder. But yeah, dude, that's my testimony. 2025 has been the hardest fucking year of my life, but I'm beyond grateful for it because of how much I've grown from it. Not only did I surpass every obstacle, but I get to share those experiences with you guys in hopes of guiding you along your journey as well. If any one of you guys are going through something, such as a struggle, or you just want to get something off your chest, you are more than free to leave a comment down below, and I'll be glad to try and help you, or if you just need someone to listen to your problems. Because at the end of the day, we can't do this by ourselves. We need each other. And talking about your problems is the first step in overcoming them. I appreciate y'all watching the video though. Y'all stay blessed and y'all have a good one.